Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today, something that might not feel comfortable at first, but it's powerful. If you want a man to finally tell you how he feels, you don't chase the truth out of him. You don't interrogate it out of him, and you definitely don't beg it out of him. You create the space where the truth has no choice but to rise. Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you about something most people underestimate, and that is the power of silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not losing. Silence is not giving up. Silence is one of the loudest forms of communication when it's rooted in self-respect. See, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to force conversations, when you stop asking for clarity that someone isn't ready to give, you give the truth room to breathe. Pressure makes people defensive, but silence makes them reflective. A man doesn't suddenly discover his feelings because you keep asking him to name them. He discovers them when he feels the shift, when the noise stops, when the constant availability ends, when the emotional safety net you provided without conditions is no longer guaranteed. That's when his mind starts working overtime. Silence removes distractions. It forces him to sit with his own thoughts, his own emotions, his own confusion. Here's what happens when you go quiet with dignity. He starts replaying conversations. He starts noticing your absence in moments where your presence used to bring comfort. He starts wondering why you're no longer checking in, no longer seeking reassurance, no longer bending yourself to keep things smooth. And in that space, truth rises, because the truth doesn't need to be chased, it needs to be uncovered. Most men are not ignoring their feelings, they are postponing them. And silence removes the option to postpone. When you stop asking him how he feels, he starts asking himself. When you stop chasing clarity, he starts chasing certainty. Your calm withdrawal becomes a mirror. It reflects his indecision back to him without a single word. This kind of silence is not punishment. It's not manipulation. It's boundaries. It's choosing peace over anxiety. It's saying, I'm not going to force what's meant to be freely given. And when a man senses that you are okay without answers, that you are grounded without validation, it does something to his core. Confidence like that commands honesty. Silence also removes fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being pushed, fear of being cornered. When there is no pressure, there is room for truth. And men speak their truth when they don't feel trapped, when they feel the choice is theirs, but the consequence of not choosing is real. See, loud people demand answers. Strong people allow silence to do the work, and silence never lies. It exposes intentions. It reveals priorities. It brings clarity without confrontation. And when he finally speaks, it won't be because you forced the moment. It will be because the silence made the truth impossible to ignore. Expend 2 key, not 500 words without subheading and conclusion. No, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain why pulling back changes everything and why it awakens something inside a man that constant availability never will. When you pull back, you are not disappearing. And you are not playing games. You are simply interrupting a pattern. Human beings don't become emotionally aware when everything stays the same. Awareness is triggered by contrast, by change, by the sudden realization that something familiar is no longer guaranteed. When you are always there, always understanding, always flexible, always adjusting, your presence becomes predictable, valuable, yes, but predictable. Predictability creates comfort, not urgency. Pulling back introduces awareness. It forces him to notice what he took for granted, not in a dramatic way, not with arguments or ultimatums, but quietly, powerfully. The moment you stop overgiving, his emotional radar switches on. He starts sensing the shift. He may not understand it right away, but he feels it. The tone changes. The rhythm changes. The energy changes. And men respond to energy far more than words. You don't need to explain why you're pulling back. Explaining weakens the impact. Your behavior speaks clearly enough. Pulling back gives him time to feel instead of react. When you're always present, he reacts to you. When you step back, he reflects on you. Reflection is where emotional awareness lives. That's where he starts asking himself questions he avoided before. Why does this feel different? Why do I miss her voice? Why does her absence feel heavier than I expected? This is when emotional ownership begins. Instead of responding to your needs, he starts confronting his own feelings. And that's a critical shift. A man doesn't truly understand how he feels until he feels the possibility of loss. Not threatened loss, not forced loss. Just the quiet realization that things won't stay the same forever. Pulling back also removes emotional dependency. You're no longer the one holding the emotional weight of the connection. And when that weight is no longer carried by you, he starts feeling it himself. That's when clarity forms. Some men step up, some step away, but either way, you get the truth. What's powerful about pulling back is that it restores balance. You return to yourself. You refocus on your peace, your life, your rhythm. And that grounded energy changes how you're perceived. You're no longer someone waiting for answers. You become someone with options. Someone whole, someone secure. Men open up emotionally when they feel both freedom and responsibility. Pulling back gives him freedom from pressure and responsibility for choice. That combination is what activates honesty. Not chasing, not demanding, not convincing, just standing still and letting awareness do the work. And when he finally speaks, it won't feel forced or rushed. It will feel real because it came from awareness, not pressure. Expend 3 key, not 500 words without subheading and conclusion. Self-respect changes the entire emotional dynamic between two people, especially when it comes to a man opening up about how he truly feels. When you operate from self-respect, you stop asking for love in ways that diminish you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop tolerating confusion just to keep someone close. And that shift does something powerful. It creates emotional safety without you saying a single word. A man feels safest being honest with someone who respects themselves. Not someone who threatens to leave. Not someone who begs him to stay. But someone who is steady, grounded, and secure in who they are. Self-respect communicates confidence, and confidence removes fear. When fear is removed, honesty can finally breathe. When you respect yourself, you don't rush emotional timelines. You don't force conversations that aren't ready to happen. You don't punish silence with chaos. Instead, you remain calm, you stay consistent, and that consistency tells him, I'm not here to trap you. I'm here to stand in truth. That kind of energy lowers defenses. Most men don't hide their feelings because they're heartless. They hide them because they're afraid of the consequences, afraid of expectations, afraid of disappointing you, afraid of being locked into something they're not sure they can sustain. Self-respect reassures him that honesty won't be weaponized against him. When you stop reacting emotionally to every moment of uncertainty, you show emotional maturity. You show that you can handle truth, even if it's uncomfortable. And that matters more than you realize. Men open up when they believe their truth will be received with strength, desperation. Self-respect also sets invisible boundaries. You don't have to announce them. You don't have to explain them. They're felt. And those boundaries tell them that clarity is required, not optional. Confusion isn't rewarded. Ambiguity isn't entertained. And yet there's no pressure, no hostility, no demand, just quiet standards. When a man senses that you value yourself, he starts valuing your presence differently. He becomes more careful with your emotions, more intentional with his words, because he knows access to you isn't automatic, it's earned. And when something has to be earned, it's treated with care. Self-respect also gives you patience without anxiety. You're no longer waiting for him to define the connection to feel secure. You're secure regardless. And that independence is magnetic. It shifts the power dynamic from needing answers to allowing truth. The safest space for honesty is one where dignity leads the way. When you choose self-respect, you stop chasing emotional safety from someone else. You become it. And when that happens, truth has a way of finding its voice. Expend 4 key, not 500 words without subheading and conclusion. Men don't struggle with feelings as much as they struggle with fear, and that truth changes how you understand silence, distance, and hesitation. Fear is what keeps words trapped inside. Fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, fear of committing to something they're not fully sure they can protect or maintain. When fear is present, honesty shuts down. When fear is removed, the truth finds its way out naturally. A man opens up when he feels emotionally safe, not emotionally pressured. Safety doesn't come from constant reassurance or repeated conversations about where things are going. Safety comes from knowing that honesty won't be punished, that his truth won't be used against him later, that saying how he feels won't suddenly come with expectations he's not ready to carry. When those fears disappear, words flow more easily. This is why calm energy is so powerful. When you don't react with anxiety to uncertainty, when you don't spiral over silence, when you don't turn every pause into a problem, you send a clear message. You show emotional strength. And emotional strength tells him that he can speak without causing damage. Men are far more willing to open up when they believe the conversation won't explode. Fear also fades when control is removed. Men fear situations where they feel cornered. When a conversation feels like a trap, honesty feels dangerous. But when there's freedom, when there's space to think, when there's no immediate demand for answers, clarity grows. Freedom lowers defenses, and lowered defenses invite truth. Consistency plays a huge role here. When your mood, respect, and behavior don't change based on his emotional pace, he feels steadiness. That steadiness tells him the ground is solid. He doesn't have to rush. He doesn't have to perform. He doesn't have to say the perfect thing. He can just be honest. Another fear men carry is the fear of failure. The fear that once feelings are spoken, they must be acted on perfectly. Removing that fear means allowing feelings to exist without forcing outcomes. Feelings don't need to become promises immediately. When a man knows that speaking doesn't automatically mean being locked into a future he hasn't fully envisioned, honesty feels lighter. When fear leaves, emotional awareness increases. He stops avoiding his feelings and starts processing them. He notices what he misses. He recognizes what matters. He becomes more present because he's no longer protecting himself. And that's when words come out naturally, without prompting, without pushing. The goal is never to extract feelings. The goal is to create an environment where fear has no power, where honesty feels safer than silence, where truth feels easier than avoidance. When fear is removed, a man doesn't need to be asked how he feels. He tells you, because holding it in no longer feels necessary. Expend 5 key, not 600 words without subheading and conclusion. Consistency is one of the most underestimated forces when it comes to emotional clarity. When you remain consistent in how you show up, how you communicate, and how you carry yourself, you remove confusion from the connection, not by explaining anything, but by being steady. And steadiness creates pressure in the most natural way because inconsistency can hide behind chaos, but it cannot hide behind calm repetition. When your energy doesn't swing based on his mood, his attention, or his distance, he starts to feel the weight of his own uncertainty. You're no longer reacting to his mixed signals. You're no longer adjusting yourself to match his pace. You stay the same whether he leans in or pulls away, and that forces awareness. Because when you don't change, the only thing left to examine is him. Men often live comfortably in emotional gray areas when nothing challenges them. If you keep accepting unclear behavior, with the same enthusiasm, there's no reason for him to define anything. But when your consistency is paired with standards, confusion becomes uncomfortable, not because you complain about it, but because you don't reward it. Consistency also builds trust. A man can open up emotionally if he doesn't know what to expect from you. When your reactions are predictable in a healthy way, when your words align with your actions, when your boundaries don't move based on fear of loss, he relaxes. He knows where you stand, even if he hasn't fully figured out where he stands yet. This is where clarity begins to form. Because when the emotional environment is stable, his internal world becomes louder. He starts noticing that you're not chasing him on days he's distant. He notices that you don't become colder or dramatic to get a reaction. You're simply present when he's present and peaceful when he's not. That calm consistency holds up a mirror. Men are wired to respond to patterns. When the pattern is steady, it exposes indecision. And indecision doesn't like being seen. It demands resolution. Either he steps forward into clarity or he steps back completely. But what he can't do anymore is linger comfortably in confusion. Consistency also communicates self-worth. It says, "This is who I am, not who I become when I'm afraid of losing you." And that message is powerful. It tells him that access to you doesn't fluctuate based on his effort alone, but your standards. And when standards are clear, choices become clearer too. Another important piece is emotional integrity. When you say you value honesty and you don't panic when honesty shows up, he learns that truth is safe with you. When you say you're okay with space and you don't punish him for taking it, your words become credible. Credibility invites honesty more than reassurance ever could. Consistency removes the need for ultimatums. You don't have to demand clarity when your behavior already requires it. You don't have to announce your boundaries when you live by them. And that quiet strength changes the dynamic completely. It places responsibility back where it belongs. Eventually, steady presence of consistency forces a moment of truth, because remaining unclear starts to feel heavier than being honest. And when honesty feels lighter than avoidance, a man speaks. Not because he's pushed, but because clarity becomes the only comfortable option. Expend 6 key, not 600 words without subheading and conclusion. Your value is not something you explain, advertise, or negotiate. And that is exactly why it has the power to trigger honesty. The moment you truly understand your value, your behavior changes in subtle but undeniable ways. You stop overgiving to be chosen. You stop proving to be worthy. You stop shrinking yourself to make someone comfortable. And that shift sends a signal louder than any conversation ever could. When a man senses that you know your worth, he feels it immediately. Not because you say it, but because of what you no longer tolerate. You don't chase inconsistency. You don't compete for attention. You don't cling to potential while ignoring reality. You remain warm, present, and open, but you are no longer available at the cost of your dignity. And that balance is powerful. Value creates contrast. When you don't need validation to feel secure, he starts questioning his position in your life. He realizes that you're not waiting to be saved by his feelings. You're not paused until he decides. You are moving forward with or without certainty. That realization awakens honesty because suddenly silence has consequences. Men often